Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the ASPN PSPS COVID-19 Task Force Fundraiser webinar. This webinar is going to focus on providing for the safety of our heroes, friends, and colleagues on the front lines. The call will begin in just 2 minutes. Thank you for joining us. Good evening, and welcome to the ASPN PSPS COVID-19 Task Force Fundraiser webinar, providing for the safety of our heroes, friends, and colleagues on the front lines. We are so glad that you have joined us tonight. We will be starting the webinar in just 1 minute. Good evening, and welcome to the ASPN PSPS COVID-19 Task Force Fundraiser. This webinar will be focused on providing for the safety of our heroes, friends, and colleagues on the front lines. We are so glad you've joined the webinar this evening. We would like to introduce our moderators to this webinar. We have Dr. Timothy Deere, Dr. Christian Chakravarthy, and Dr. Stanley Golubac. Gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks everyone for joining us. Over the past 4 weeks, we've had about 4,000 people join us for webinars, and tonight's a different webinar. We're not talking about science or really interesting ways to treat patients actually from a standpoint of interventional pain. We're talking about humanity, and our panels we've arranged for tonight I think will be very fascinating. Whether you be join us live or whether you hear this webinar a little later this week, we're going to share some stories with you over the next hour that I think will touch your heart. Stanley, your thoughts?
Well, clearly, Tim, thank you very much, and Christian, and thank you for ASPN and PSPS. You know, the whole reason why we're here is to provide a resource to help our professional caregivers in need that are in the hospital in the forefront, and we're going to hear from some of those individuals tonight. And so what we need to do tonight is do our very best to raise as much money as we can to be able to help support this great endeavor, along with Iron Man and Iron Aid. And the whole reason of why we are here is to be able to make our planet safer, to make it the benefit of all of us to be able to enjoy an existence and to have a place that is all continue to be safe and healthy for all of us. Thanks, Tim.
Krishnan?
Yeah, thanks, Tim, Stan. So, Tim and I have been, I think I share his sentiments. This is now the 4th or 5th webinar we've been moderating on this topic, and I think it's probably the most important one. I can tell you, you think about the impact of COVID in the last 100 years. The 1918 flu strain was the one major pandemic. So, prior to this webinar, Tim made a really good point. Sometimes these circumstances that we're in, we really think about what is the value of unity and family and friendship. And in that spirit, I think this webinar is really important. This is the one time as a field where we can set aside our differences, set aside our opinions, set aside where we balance on science and what devices, et cetera, and really come together in a meaningful way. And I brought this up when I first launched this thing. We talked about heroes, and today I think you're going to hear from a lot of people who really have set aside their life and gone to the front lines and talked about what it is to make a difference. So I can say I'm inspired by them. I'm hoping that you get some part of that inspiration, and it's a small donation, but remember, these are your colleagues, your friends that are at the front lines, taking time out of their life to do something special. So I am really honored to moderate this with both of you guys, and I think I'm speaking from the heart that it's, you know, these guys are really true heroes and deserve a really rounding amount of appreciation that we can give them. So really excited to kick this off.
So here's our agenda. We'll have a panel talking about Iron Aid and helping our colleagues around the world and other fields in need of healthcare. Then we'll go to the frontline experience with our friends Paul, Karina, and Sunny, and then to a fellow who was pulled out of her fellowship to the ICU in New York City, Priyanka, who you may have met before on one of our other webinars, and then to some of our society leaders with Sudhir, Dawood, and Eric. So that's our agenda. Let's go to the first panel. When we go to the panels, if you'd like to donate tonight, here's the link, www.ironmanfoundation.org/taskforce or aspenpain.com/ironaid-fund/. Our first panel, let me introduce both people in the beginning and we'll go from there, but I'm gonna start with Sarah Hartman. Sarah is the director of the Ironman Foundation, the executive director, and she's really done wonderful things around the world. And this year, committed to Iron Aid to help really help people in need. And she's gonna talk a little bit about the mission of Iron Aid. So with that, I'll give you Sarah Hartman. Sarah, it's all yours.
Good evening, and thank you so much for welcoming me this evening for this webinar. I thought I would start by giving a high-level overview of the Ironman Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are the charitable arm of the Ironman Group and our family of 250 races around the world. That's in 58 countries and 6 continents. Our mantra is service through sport, commitment to community, and it is our mission to create positive impact in all the communities where we race through grant funding and volunteerism. And when we forecasted this year, we were on track to give $2 million across 75 communities and have 27 projects and 700 bikes for kids, and then the pandemic hit. And so our focus, our entire focus moved to Iron Aid, which is a program that was conceived by Dr. Deere to engage athletes in the healthcare industry to help raise funds for health-related causes. And so this year in 2020, all of our Iron Aid funds are designated to the Iron Aid COVID-19 Support Fund. And on this next slide, I'd like to give you a little bit of information about the Iron Aid program. The donations, and thanks to all who have donated, are going to fund grants to health-related organizations around the world. The first round of grants will be announced on May 1st and will support a wide variety of projects and frontline workers. These projects include things like PPE and ventilators, supporting social service programs and food banks, the vulnerable in quarantine, research, and much more. The second component of the Iron Aid program is Operation Iron Aid face masks in partnership with a company called Framebridge, who's repurposed part of their factory in Kentucky to help make non-sterile masks and PPE. They're transforming our new unused race shirts into non-sterile face masks, and they have repurposed their acrylic from framing into acrylic face shields. In our first batch, we're on target to make 500,000 non-sterile masks and 100,000 face shields. And just this past week, we began notifying our beneficiaries. The Arizona Professional Firefighters Association will receive about 15,000 masks and shields to help protect their first responders. So we're truly grateful again to everyone for your support, and we're looking forward to sharing the stories of our grantees, their photos and videos. And if you should know of an organization who is a potential grantee or a beneficiary of masks and face shields, please do have them apply. You'll find the link on that URL where you can donate, and it will take you to the application page. And also on that page, you can see this in the next slide, you'll find the information on the Iron Aid drawing, courtesy of NFL quarterback and Hall of Famer Jim Kelly. He's donated some amazing memorabilia, and every $10 donation is an entry into that drawing. Let's show them the photos of his jersey and the signed football and the signed helmet. There we go, and his book as well. All of the donations that we've received to date up until Sunday, April 26th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time will be entered into the drawing. And I just again wanted to say how honored I am to be here, and thank you again for the support of the Iron Aid COVID-19 Support Fund.
Sarah.
Sarah, great comments. I think Stanley Golovac has a question for you, Sarah.
So Sarah, I've participated in a few events in the past, never an Ironman. I'm sorry that I wasn't as skilled and as athletic as Dr. Timothy Deere, but I have gone to Charleston, South Carolina, and done the Cooper River Bridge Run about 10 times. With the event having like 40,000 people, how is Ironman going to be able to proceed moving forward to sort of not corral people in a manner that puts us close together with this unfortunate consequence of COVID? Are we sort of envisioning a different way of starting our races and doing something different with Ironman coming up in October?
I think you described it perfectly, and congratulations on all of those runs. That's really fantastic. We're in uncharted territory. We all have stories around this pandemic. There is no normal, and we do not know what the new normal looks like yet. So every day, our global team has been looking at the data and determining the best course of action. And so I would say stay tuned. As we collect the science, we're going to be able to make the best decisions to keep people safe, and then also to have this sport, to enjoy endurance sports is I think something fantastic. It's a great way of life, and I'm really excited that many of our athletes have been staying fit. We ended up launching a virtual race series so that people can connect online and continue their fitness, something that I think is very important for staying healthy during the crisis.
Yeah, we have a virtual race. I think it's a lot of fun. So Stan, congratulations on those races. Today is Boston Marathon. Today was Boston Marathon Day, so I'm missing that. But one way to stay away from people, Stan, is you go really slow or really fast. And our next panelist goes really fast. Dave Daggett is on to talk to us a little bit about how you can race and raise money through sport and help support your communities. And Dave, this whole thing is about supporting people, as Sarah mentioned, giving all those masks to firefighters and paramedics around the world with the Iron Aid Fund, helping people protect themselves and their patients. So can you talk a little bit about your experience? Dave Daggett's been through many in Hawaii and many races, and he's an elite athlete. So David.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm pleased to join Sarah as a more than 30-year Ironman athlete. Service through sport is a great description, and a lot of athletes really live out that lifestyle. And I'm pleased to have been part of the Ironman Foundation way back 30 years ago, and now part of Iron Aid. My wife and I made a donation today to this cause, and we're pleased to be part of that. I also want to tell you that I really admire the medical community, and Sarah and I were on a conference call last evening with some of the frontline doctors who you're going to hear more of later. Extremely touching. In fact, I just shut my camera off. It brought me to tears hearing the stories that they told us. And one of the things I wanted to ask just real quickly, and Dr. Deere asked me to address through my work with professional athletes and coaches over almost 40 years now, is how are you doing, medical providers, and taking care of yourself? That sounds like it's preaching to the choir, but lots of times the providers are the ones that need care. One of the things that athletes always do and coaches always tell us is what you have to do is find structure out of chaos. In some way, somehow, you need to find a piece of a routine that works in your life in keeping it going. And a great place to start is with your health, because exercise and diet raises your immunity and makes us all have a better defense toward this disease. So really quickly, sleep is power. There's been studies that have shown that lack of sleep can be more dangerous than drunk driving. So sleep is power. Second, food is fuel. And I've been telling my office friends, everybody around, that during this time is a great time to clean up your diet, which adds immunity to you. Lastly, movement is medicine. Just last week, Dr. Deere Med School alma mater, University of Virginia, came out with the first study showing that exercise builds antioxidants that protects you against ARDS and the COVID respiratory viruses. So sleep is power, food is fuel, movement is medicine. Remember that as you go through your daily routine. This fundraising campaign, Sarah, thank you so much. This is a little bit of a unique campaign in that every dollar raised goes directly to the cause, PPE, masks, and other essentials for healthcare workers. And whether it's a large donation or those $5, $10, $15, $20 donations, every donation that we get tonight is very, very important. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Sarah, for all you do. Medical providers that are joining us, you're our heroes, and we are pleased to support you during this time. Stan, Tim, Kirsten, thank you so much for what you're doing.
So David, you and I've raced each other many times, and it's always a great honor to be with you. But what you said is so true. You have to move, you have to sleep, you have to eat well. Krishnan, you want to ask a question for David before we go to the next panel?
Sure. So I just want to say, for those who don't know me, I was a big Buffalo native, so I'm really excited that Jim Kelly's jersey is going to be the one that's auctioned. I've known Tim for a long time, and he's a big proponent of exercise. And I think one of the things, David, you've accomplished so much in terms of all the successful races that you've done. What advice would you give to the younger generation that are interested in pursuing passionate things outside of the work? I mean, I think it's partly to this day you see some of the folks that are taking a step out of their day-to-day life. So how did you manage to find that balance to be able to do the things that you really love?
Well, what I have found is that through exercise and movement, I've actually become a better professional. I've been able to integrate that into my life in a way that I have a morning ritual that during my swim workout, until this little hiatus here, I'm able to outline my day, go through a period of meditation, get set for the rigors, and go through. A lunchtime workout is a time my office throws me out of the office because I need a stress break. But again, I can reactivate my mind and get going. The important thing is, particularly for younger professionals, find something that you enjoy doing and that you want to repeat, and then find a place in your life where you can plug that in and make that kind of sacrosanct that that's what you're going to do and keep doing it. And, I don't know, I've been an competitive athlete for 48 years now, is that if you work that into a lifestyle, I look at the events as just being the dessert and the reward for an active, healthy fitness lifestyle. And the nice thing is it makes me sharper and more agile at work, and it keeps me going. And at 60, I'm still one of the most active people in my office, and I'm first one up, and I get going. I'm rolling all day long.
David, I feel like I'm listening to myself talk. It's either good for you or bad for you. I'm not sure which.
My oldest daughter thinks Dr. Deere and I got separated at birth.
I think we did. So thank you very much, both of you. We'll come back at the very end for questions. If you have questions for either one of our panelists, type them in, and we'll come back at the very end for those last minute questions. So thank you both.
We admire what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you very much. Our next panel, if you are easy to cry, I think you may cry in the next 30 minutes. But I will tell you, if you have any friends at home who aren't on this webinar, text them right now and tell them to join the webinar. They can watch it later, but this is a good time because I'm going to introduce the next three panelists, and then we're going to have each of them give about 5 minutes or so of their experiences, and then there'll be a question for each of them, and then more at the end. But our first panelist, Paul Lynch, I've known since he was a fellow. Many years ago. I met him early after his fellowship, watched his practice develop, and Paul posted online that he was going to New York City, where he trained at NYU, to Bellevue. He has asthma. He has a bunch of children, and so I started praying for Paul's safety, and Paul went to Bellevue because he felt the need to go. Sonny actually is in California. Sonny actually, I don't know that well. I've always admired his work and activism for our specialty. And one day I followed the governor of California on social media. And one day Sonny pops up on his social media in like all of his PPE. And I thought, my gosh, Sonny is everywhere. He's out there on the front lines helping people. And here he is. I thought he was this pain physician, but here he is on the front lines, doing great work. And then Karina, on day one of this event, I came home from being down in Florida, and I got home and I got a text from Karina, and that text says, "Do you have any N95 mask?" I don't have any, and I'm in a world of trouble here in New York, and we were overwhelmed with COVID. And at that point, we didn't have any COVID in West Virginia, and I called my hospital urgently because I was worried about Karina. And what I found was we didn't have any N95 mask at all, so I couldn't help her, and I felt so helpless, and I prayed for her that night. So these are our three panelists, and after each of you give your presentation, you'll hear Stan or Christian ask you a question. And those of you online, if you have any questions for Paul, Sonny, or Karina, type those in. At the very end, I'm going to come back and ask those questions to you. So Paul, we'll have you go first.
Tim, thank you so much for having me, and thank you in the midst of this crisis for always thinking about others and trying to raise money for the frontline workers. That's very typical of you to be thinking of others, and God bless you for everything you're doing. I'm in at Bellevue Hospital. I've been working on a COVID-19 unit, so everyone on the unit has COVID. We normally have 12 beds, but we've been putting 2 patients to each room. So we have as many as 24. Most days we have 21 or 22. It's crazy. Anyone who's worked in ICU, we normally have, 3 or 4 patients that are really sick, and the rest of them are kind of transient, kind of coming through and coming out, and we stabilize them. But right now, everyone is incredibly sick, and everyone is close to death. And so I could talk a lot about the death and the dying and the sadness, but actually I really want to talk about, and you kind of inspired me on this, Tim, you talked about the humanity of it. I want to talk about the human element and the good that we can do in the midst of the death and the dying and the crisis. I read a study last week, I think I'm on day 12 today, and I read a study last week when I was first starting saying that around 70% of the patients we intubate are never going to wake up. And that just hit me really hard, thinking, normally as anesthesiologists, we go to a code and we intubate, and it's this happy thing where we've kind of saved the day. But I didn't feel that way. I felt like, I was going to a funeral in some respects. But it really, it moved me to make sure that I spent time talking to the patients. So I started asking them questions about who they were and where they were from and their family. And I just wanted to get them to talk about themselves. I think at the end of life, it's important to have loved ones with you and people that care about you. And a lot of these patients aren't getting that. They're getting intubated and they never wake up again. And even their families can't come to see them even in the ICU. And so, I met a lot of, I met a lot of wonderful people, at the end, and I've been checking on them each day to make sure they're still alive, and most of them are still alive in our unit. We have wonderful doctors that are doing a great job. But besides the impact you have on the patient, I think there's also, we need to be mindful of the patient's families. They're so stricken with grief and they can't see their family members. They can't come see them. We're on a COVID unit, so no one can come on the floor. And so early on, I downloaded, if you guys don't have this, I downloaded Doximity, the app. It's so easy to use. Like, I don't know, I was intimidated when we first started doing this telemedicine, but it's so easy to use. I downloaded it within minutes. There are 2 features that I use that I recommend you all use. One is I was calling patients on my cell phone because there was like no phones available. We literally have like 2 to 3 times as many people working as normal and 2 times as many patients. So I started calling on my cell phone. At first, I would hit star 67 and no one would answer. And then I would just use my own cell phone number and they still wouldn't answer. Like, who's this crazy guy from Arizona calling me? And so then I used the Doximity app and I wrote in the little memo, Bellevue Hospital. And when I call, the patient sees Bellevue Hospital. This took me like 2 minutes and they picked up on the first ring. And then there's a feature where I could do FaceTime, and I just started calling on my patients and letting them, hold the phone up, like we do, hold the phone up and look at their loved ones. They want to see them, they want to experience it, even if they're sick. I think they deserve to see their family members. And so just subtle things that we can do as healers make a really big difference. And listening to them. I know many of us have dealt with critical care, and I think our phone calls are very, very quick. But my phone calls have become very, very long, and I asked them to tell me what was special about their loved one so I could report it back on rounds. And sometimes they would talk 20 or 30 minutes, and it seems like a waste of time, but it really is not. It's so important that we touch the families. And one guy that I talked to last week, after like 30 minutes, I asked him if there was anything else I could do for him, and he asked me to pray for him, and I said no problem. And I asked him what his religion was, and he said he was Muslim, that he recently converted, but he didn't care what religion I was. He just wanted me to pray with him. And so we prayed together, Christian with Muslim, and it was such a special time. And his loved one passed away yesterday, and it was hard on him, and it was hard on me. That's what I wanted to talk about, Tim, was the human element, what we can do for the patients and their families, even beyond the medicine.
Paul, that was amazing. I think Stanley has a question for you.
Paul, you and I have known each other for many years. I mean, you're the utmost professional when it comes to your business and your integrity and your commitment and devotion to being a physician and taking care of the sickest of the sickest. So thank you, and I tip my hat off to you continuously as a devoted friend and definitely a committed individual. Are you finding that there's something a little different with these patients that seem to be a little bit more susceptible, Paul, that are causing some young to be critically ill, and then some elderly individuals that seem to be making it out of the hospital not unscathed, but they seem to be able to be more resistant? Is there some kind of a common denominator that we should be trying to focus on, or is it just a lottery, it seems?
No, it's a great question. So we have data now. New York City, unfortunately, is close to 19, or not New York City, but New York State is close to 19,000 deaths now, with 200,000-ish cases. So now we have a huge data set. It's not a prospective randomized controlled trial, but you can retrospectively look at the data. And the governor released the data last week and showed that Hispanic Americans are about 2.5 times more likely to die. And we're not talking about infection rate, we're talking about death rates versus infection. So Hispanic Americans are about 2.5 times more likely to die. African Americans are about 2 times more likely to die. Asian Americans are slightly protective at 0.8 chance. Males are significantly more likely to die. We probably have a 50% higher chance. Obesity, diabetes, and hypertension. So if you're Hispanic, Black, male, hypertensive, obese, or diabetes, then you have the worst outcomes. There's also some data just coming out in the last 2 days showing, hematocrit levels are predictive, which is incredible. No one would know why that would be. Early onset of muscle aches is really predictive of a bad outcome. Early elevations of liver enzymes is predictive of a bad outcome. Every week that goes by, more studies are coming out.
Right.
That's what we know right now.
Very good, Paul. Thanks for sharing. That's all so important. Karina, you want to talk about your experience over in the Bronx? Yeah, you're muted, actually, Karina. You're muted.
Hi, let's start that again. So thank you again, Tim, for first of all promptly answering my text message as soon as I texted you. You always have. I've known you also for about 10 years, and I've been part of this Pain Society family for about 15, and I'm very it's nice to be able to instantly contact any of you guys as part of this society and know that somebody's going to call me back right away, whether it's a spinal cord stimulator or a PPE. So that was really great. And I'm part of a large scale academic medical center. I stayed in academia. I teach medical students, residents, fellows. I love what I do. And I spent half of my time doing acute pain in the hospital, half of my time doing interventional pain, and now 100% of my time dealing with COVID. And I think that since I'm like nodding my head at everything that Paul was saying, but I guess what I'll focus on instead is maybe the metamorphosis of what happened in our institution, in terms of everybody from the attending down to the medical students that became doctors 3 months early as they graduated last weekend, and how scary it was, and also how, you're an attending maybe for 10 or 15 years and you just got yourself settled and you have small kids, and all of a sudden you lose your child's care, or maybe your parents have COVID, and all of a sudden you have to put all of that secondary to taking care of your students, your trainees, and then also your patients, and making sure that you survive so that you can control all of those environments. And I've always, as a woman and also a mom of four, I really focus on work-life balance, and I talk about that a lot now because I love what I do professionally and I really care about my home. And so I have seen so many people break down. That week that I called you, because I work a lot with orthopedic surgeons, I had a good percentage of 30% of my orthopedic surgeons call me at home because I'm an anesthesiologist and cry on the phone. And I think it was men, grown men, with families and wives and everything else, but they wanted to talk to a colleague and just, what's going on? What are we doing now? How many ICUs have we opened? What's the next line? How many residents are we pulling to this unit? And the crisis and the anxiety and how we had to negotiate all of those, Saturday night meetings at 9 p.m. at night as we're renegotiating. Okay, well, we thought we were only going to have to open like 6 ICUs, but actually we're going to open 8 ICUs because, we don't have enough able-minded physicians to prone the patients and to teach the nurses how to work with the pumps and just the day-to-day that we had to manage. And I love organizing and doing that and teaching. But, when you have a 400-pound young 37-year-old person who is altered mental status and needs to be intubated, then you push your trainee out of the way and say, you know what, I'm going to do this one. And you want to, I told my residents not to go into those rooms. You know what I mean? As we had to IM dart some of these patients and coax them into lying down and put this big plastic box that some of you have seen on the internet to protect the aerosolization, and then use the glide scope to get that tube in, and know that when you left the room, you didn't know what was going to happen to the patient afterwards. And you carry these people home. And at the same time, I want to echo a little bit of something that Paul said, which is that it's been incredibly powerful to have everybody kind of like come together like an old 1980s Ghostbuster movie where everybody sings Kumbaya and, helps each other out. Like, people are scared. People need that emotional support. Forget about even the PPE. There's a huge PTSD. People stop sleeping. People's work's this whatever life you had built for yourself, everything stopped and your whole schedule changed. Even, how you take care of your own family, what times you go into work, how you take care of your colleagues, what you're doing clinically on a day-to-day basis. It's different than what you did a month ago, right? My problems today are different, and I'm really appreciative to be able to go through it with really good people and to work hard to emotionally help each other and to do our best for these people, even though we know that 70% of people aren't going to come off of the ventilator necessarily. And even if you do your damnedest, it's not always going to be the best thing, but you're working so hard, and we're sending articles, and all of us are constantly reading and organizing meals for each other or whatever it is. I have somebody who's working with me tomorrow night, and I know she's exhausted. I told her not to come in. I told her I was going to cover her work for her because I know that she hasn't slept in 4 days. You have to help everybody else. And I think that that's one of the silver linings of this. And I get to spend a different kind of time with my kids, which I appreciate too. That's my story.
Great thoughts, Karina. I really think that's really inspiring. And so, Krishna, you have a question for Karina before I go to Sunny?
Yeah, sure. No, I just want to say, Paul and Karina, amazing stories, very touching. I think one of the things that gets challenging for a lot of us is in times of anxiety, individual voices gets drowned out. And one of the things that I'm hearing your story, Karina, and how much you've taken a leadership, where do you draw your inspiration from? I mean, I think it's amazing to hear how hard it is to put stuff together. And I can imagine in ICU, I remember when I was doing my rotations, there's 10 different opinions, and that's just when it's in a controlled setting. But you know, where do you draw your inspiration? How have you gotten the strength to kind of really, you know, it seems like amazing impact on the front lines? Can you share a little bit of that? That'd be great.
You'll laugh. My mom, my grandparents, Sudhir Diwan, Peter Statz, Lisa Barr, who was at Sloan Kettering. I mean, I can point these people. And I'm not just saying that because some of them might be on the computer right now, but the funny story that was always told was that when I was a medical student, I kind of already decided I was going to do pain management and I was going to, you know, run the world. And like, you know, I was this crazy, overeager, young little person. And I ran into this tall man in the hallways when I got into residency. And I said, "Excuse me, sir, who can I talk to about pain management? I'm going to be a resident here and I really want to do things and I'm so excited." And the guy said, "Well, actually, you talk to me. My name's Sudhir." And so this is the story, and he's probably off screen laughing at me right now for mentioning this in front of however many people. But he became an adopted dad, and I was really lucky to be able to meet many of the gentlemen of pain who became my adopted. My dad died early on, and I was lucky enough to have a lot of people who mentored me throughout the years. So I don't know. I'm lucky. I have a lot of
it's funny you said
family.
that. I met Karina. I met you when you were very young, and you told me early on that you were going to do pain as you were a resident. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Amazing.
No offense to him. It's just Sudhir came first.
No, Sudhir, I mean, he's going to be talking to us a little later. On the slide you see on the webinar, there's how you can donate. And so Stan Golovac just donated a moment ago. You can see aspenpain.com/ironaid/fund. So you can see it down at the bottom on your right and the left as well for IronMan Foundation. Our last speaker in this segment, before we wrap up with our society directors and leaders, is Sunny. Sunny, again, you're on the other coast. You know, it's another area that's been a very busy, troubling area, and you've been on the front lines. Can you tell us about some of your experiences?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you great.
Okay, great. So thank you guys so much for inviting me for the panel. Corinne and Paul, the work you all are doing in New York is incredibly inspiring, and it sucks that you guys are going through that, but you guys are doing amazing works, and we everywhere around the world, doctors around the world appreciate what it is you're doing. So good job. So how I kind of play into this, as Tim mentioned, the governor did tweet out a photo of me. And I think one aspect of healthcare that's really kind of personified my early career, or my career in general, I guess, I still am early career technically, is my organization, my activities in organized medicine. About 3 Saturdays ago, I got a call from a friend of mine who is a former, he used to run a hospital, part of a team that's trying to save a hospital, I should say, that recently went out of business about 2 months ago, 3 months ago, I should say. And the state of California had just leased it out the day prior to turn into a surge hospital for COVID positive patients. And so he basically called me. He's like, "Hey, we got to get this hospital open and turned around like ASAP." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds like quite a challenge there." So like, who is helping us? What army is helping us get this accomplished? He's like, "So far I have you, and that's about it." So that's kind of how things started. I immediately contacted my friends at the California Medical Association, LA County Medical Association, and my friends within the National Guard. In about 4 hours, we had a conference call set up, and things quickly started to materialize. We had the president, the CEO, the CM of the California Medical Association, CMO of, the CEO of the LA County Medical Association, a lot of different players, a lot of key stakeholders, folks in the California, Assistant Secretary of Health of California, a lot of relevant folks. And we basically put a team together. Long story short, about 2.5 weeks, or 2 and a half weeks later, we actually opened the hospital last Tuesday for patients. So we're a transfer center for COVID positive patients only. We went through, imagine, I guess this is what the kind of analogy I've been using. Imagine if somebody packs up at a hospital overnight that's previously relatively functional and working, and put very little labels on things, and then you find a separate team who comes in almost 3 months later, unpacks everything, and has to go through everything. This is a 360 bed hospital as well, so it's a big place. So went through everything, got the whole thing restocked, redone. It's actually a pretty profound California partnership. Kaiser of California and Dignity Health of California are running the nuts and bolts of the operation, such as providing the supply chain, pharmacy, environmental services, all that stuff that us as doctors don't really deal with, and don't really have the best expertise to deal with. So they're doing it, and I'm part of the group of doctors kind of running it. The clinical operations side, staffing, recruitment of staffs, clinical pathways, that sort of thing. So it's been a crazy partnership. So you have Kaiser and Dignity running the stuff on that end, and then you have a clinical partnership of doctors basically volunteering from USC, where I work at USC. I'm a faculty member at USC. We have folks from UCLA, Cedars-Sinai, Good Samaritan, a lot of the other hospitals in the LA, Southern California area, basically coming together to staff this hospital. So we've had in the 6 days we've been open, we've had a total of 11 admissions, 2 discharges. We have 9 patients in the house currently. All 9 are critically ill, ventilated patients, and some are doing better than others. Some, like in the statistics Paul and Karina are mentioning, are not looking like they're going to be having a favorable outcome from this. So it's quite an impressive team to be part of, quite an experience to be part of. I'm only 3 years out of training, 3 years out of fellowship. So to be involved with something this big and this huge, and to see basically start a hospital in about 2.5 weeks' time is an incredible experience for me, and probably something I will never forget.
No, Sonny, that's a great, it shows your organizational skills, it shows your leadership, it shows your commitment to helping others. Stan, do you have a question for Sonny before I ask the final question to all 3 of them?
Yeah, I sure do. Thank you very much, Tim. And, it was very easy to be able to donate at that link that's at the bottom of the screen. So, for those of you listening, please go to that link and just click a few little areas and you'll be able to easily donate. So
Stan, Stan, I think you just donated a moment ago, correct? While we're doing the air.
I most certainly did. Thank you very much for acknowledging that. So, Sonny, you're an incredible individual, just 3 years out of fellowship. I've been doing this now for 35 years, and I don't know if I could swing it to run a hospital like you've been doing. So congratulations to you. What are you doing to actually keep up the morale of the individuals that have jumped into the fire? Because basically, they're on the front line, and they're dealing with critically ill individuals that are going to have a rough road ahead of them. So what are you doing as their mentor to try to get these individuals inspired to show up to work every day like Paul and Karina?
Fortunately, the experience in California for the most part is nothing even remotely close to what's happening in New York at all. We've had a lot of hospitals have taken the onus on reducing case volumes and emptying out their hospitals. ER volumes are down. Basically, people showing up to the hospital are either extremely urgent, sick patients with cancer or other critical conditions. And so you basically have a lot of healthcare workers who are not doing anything in California. You have a lot of pain doctors that are trained in anesthesia that basically have nothing to do because they can't do procedures, they can't do anything, and they're not making their money. Same thing on the nursing side as well. PACU nurses, pre-op nurses, there isn't much happening for them. So we've actually been able to recruit a lot of people very quickly. We have too many people, frankly, which is obviously in stark contrast to what's happening in New York. And it really is, it's a tale of two different epidemics. I mean, what you're seeing in New York, I mean, our goal in California, I mean, creating these surge hospitals right now is to avoid scenes like you're seeing in New York. And I don't think we're really going to see that, because we're already talking about opening up elective surgeries again, because that's something that hasn't really been, it's not really being discussed in the healthcare community. Many of these hospitals in California, they're distressed at baseline, and they only have a few, I think it was a study, about 30% of hospitals have 7 days of cash on hand. So elective surgeries and all that stuff need to get started. Elective procedures need to get started. And we're inching closer to that pretty quickly, actually. PPE shortages haven't really been a problem here either. For the most part, we haven't had to share N95s. We haven't had to really use them, longer than a day, or recycle, frankly. So it's very much a very, very different epidemic here than what we're seeing in New York.
Well, thank you very much for all of the work you're doing. I mean, it's incredible. So thank you very much.
No,
Thanks.
that absolutely, Stan. Sunny, very impressive. I want to finish this panel with a question for both Karina and Paul, and then we're going to move to our last two panels, because I think time-wise we're going to be about perfect after those two panels. Karina, Paul, I'll start with you. My grandpa was a medic in World War II in Normandy, and he survived, right, which was a miracle. And I wouldn't be here today if he hadn't. Thank God he did. But I asked him one time, I said, were you afraid on the beach? You're on the beach in Normandy. Were you afraid? And he never liked to talk much about the war, but he said, no, I never thought about it. It never crossed my mind, which seems kind of shocking to me, because, we see those movies like Saving Private Ryan. So my question for Paul and Karina in New York. So Sonny, you told us a little bit about California. Thank God you've managed it quite well there, and you've had great, pretty much great control of the disease. But Paul, Karina, you're in the hotbed. Have you been afraid for yourself? And Karina, I'll start with you. I'll go to Paul, and then we're going to come to Priyanka for our next panel.
I think that when you have a family, you have no choice but to be afraid, but not so much for yourself, but for what's going to happen if I'm not there to be there at bedtime or whatever. Not that we don't have other responsibilities, but it's how does my lack of presence affect everybody else? But doing the job isn't scary. It's what we've been trained to do. We are all, I'd like to think, doing this because we really care about medicine. We didn't choose to go through this just for kicks, I hope. And so there's also something very powerful to say, to watch a pandemic develop. And as we learn more, and even in 1 month, how much new information we've learned, I find that really, it's sad about hearing all the codes all day long. But then those 3,000 patients that have been discharged, those patients that you extubate, feeling that truly novel success, it takes all the fear out of it, because you're doing something real, and you're not just a monkey, or you're not just somebody who's doing something routine. You're doing something truly interesting and special, and so it takes away all the fear.
That's great. That's a great answer. Paul, you have asthma, which many people may not know. You traveled from Arizona all the way to New York because you felt this need to do so, much like my partner, Nick Bremer, traveled from West Virginia to New York, another brave young man. Nick's in Bellevue right now with you in the ICU, and we're proud of him. So Paul, what was your thoughts of going to New York City? Do you have any fear?
I didn't feel afraid for like the first 7 or 8 days. And, I prayed about it with my family, and I feel like it's what God told me to do. And I trust God that he's going to watch after me. But I think, whatever the result is, I know that I'm making a difference in people's lives, and that's the way I want to live my life. I got afraid maybe 2 or 3 days ago. One of my old teachers came into the hospital to get checked on. My mentor went down to see him and give him a pulse ox and make sure he's okay. He looked really sick. He has COVID. About 50% of our department has it. And when I saw him, my heart started beating. And then I went upstairs and I saw Nick, and Nicholas Bremer came over and said, yeah, we're going to this year. If we don't have it already, we're definitely going to get it. And so I definitely started to feel more afraid. But you know, I just I'm not gonna take too much time, but I think God's definitely calmed my spirit that everything's gonna be fine. I knew coming here that I might, you know, get the virus, and I'll just disclose right now because it's, you know, many of you are gonna find out anyways. I think I may have been exposed. I was sent home early today. I was just profound weakness and body aches and a low grade temperature, and so I was sent home. And we're not really sure what's going to happen at this point. I'm waiting for the test to come back, but I'm not sure they're going to let me return to the hospital the way it looks right now.
Paul, we'll be thinking of you, and we'll be in touch with you, and we'll be watching you and thinking about you all the time. And so, Sonny, Karina, Paul, thank you so much for sharing your stories. It's been a great panel with you, and we greatly appreciate it. And we'll be chatting with you a little later if we have time remaining. So thank you so
Thank you.
much. Our next
Yeah.
panel is going to be a one-person panel. Priyanka, you heard Karina talk a little bit about her commitment to her residents and fellows. And you were a fellow in the paint program. And which paint program were you located at?
I'm at Cornell, so I'm in New York as well.
At Cornell with Neil Mehta and Dr. Dewan's old program that he was impactful for. So you were asked to kind of, like most fellows in the country, kind of stop your fellowship basically and go into the front lines. Can you tell us your experience with that?
Yeah, so I think a couple weeks ago we were talking about just fellowship being paused, and we were asked to go to the ICUs and serve and function as ICU fellows. So we work with attendings, ICU attendings, as well as other medical attendings and residents and interns, and we manage patients in the ICU. Generally, we manage about 9 to 10 patients with the team, and we take care of, everything that Karina and Paul discussed. And so that's been a very different role than what we've been doing for all of fellowship, obviously. And while we're trained in critical care and anesthesia, a lot of the preparation for this with me, my co-fellows, was reading through all the New England Journal articles, the information Cornell provided us, everything that we could figure out to read about vents and drips and the disease itself. And so it's been certainly a very interesting and very different experience on the front lines with these patients.
Can you tell us a time during this experience where you've had something surprise you or something you've seen that really was impactful to you?
I think the most impactful thing that has happened that I've been thinking throughout this whole experience since the first day is that I arrived and my team was full of, generally when I was on ICU and anesthesia, it was surgery or anesthesia, and that was the whole team. And when I came on my first day, my 2 attendings were cardiology volunteer attendings. We had a head ICU attending that was actually from HSS that was volunteering his time to help us round. And we had 1 plastic surgery resident who was giving up his time, obviously, in the OR since his program was stopped, as well as an anesthesia resident and a surgery intern. And I think the main thing that has been very impactful for me is all these people have worked together completely seamlessly, completely selflessly, and work towards, optimizing ICU patient care for COVID patients. And I think that when I look around and I see who's working with us, and that I look around and I'll walk in the hall and Neil Mehta is there because he volunteered to be a volunteer attending to help us all out. I think that that's the most impactful thing to me, is that all these medical specialties, not just people in pain, care so much about the final goal, which is helping patients. And I think the most impactful moment was on one of my last days on service last week. There is this 30-year-old lady that we had all been working very hard to optimize and extubate, but extubations are generally very dangerous here because they're aerosolized and you don't want to reintubate, and so you have to be very careful who you extubate. But the whole team, along with the 2 ICU heads, got together, decided we were going to try, and we successfully extubated her. And I remember standing there at the window while the plastic surgery resident went in with the ICU attending, because it was actually his patient, and they so bravely did it without once thinking about the risks themselves. And after that, we all stood outside the room and watched her call her husband. And I think that kind of unity and that kind of outcome is kind of what we're all there for. And so it was a really great moment.
Well, that touched my heart. Krishnan, any questions for Priyanka before we finish up?
No, I just want to say as you can see, we're really, really proud of you. A lot of us have seen you coming and doing amazing things. And actually, my question was kind of, you answered it. Like, how did you kind of get over the anxiety? A lot of the pain fellows are worried that going back to anesthesia and those skill sets. So I think you did a really good job. I think it sounded like reading, relying on your team. So really amazing stuff.
Thanks for having me.
Stan, any questions for Priyanka before we move to the last panel?
No, I mean, she's an incredible fellow. I mean, boy, she's doing everything in the front line and deserving. So kudos and hats off to you, and continue to do everything and be safe.
Thank you.
Priyanka's gonna go to California and practice next year, and I think, is that correct, Priyanka? You want to California? So we'll have another great pain physician on the West Coast. So that'll be a huge asset, I think, to the country and to the West Coast and your patients. So we're really proud of you, and thank you for coming on tonight. Our last panel, we're going to finish right on time. We have about 5 minutes remaining, but I've seen so many societies have animosity towards each other. And one thing I've always preached is that we need to come together, not apart, and that there's good in every society that we have. And we have great leaders. And tonight we have 3 of those leaders from societies. And I'm just going to introduce you 3 gentlemen, have you each have a comment. And I think Krishnan and Stanley have a few questions for you. Sudhir Dewan, who's impacted Dr. Dawood Saeed, who's impacted Priyanka, who's impacted Karina, who's impacted so many people, is now almost tonight representing both the New York Society and ASIP both. And Eric Lee is representing PSPS, who Eric and I have been friends since he was in his fellowship, and watched him grow from New York to California, to Northern California, to Southern California, and has spent some time with me in Hawaii over the years. And then Dawood is my Pakistani brother, who runs the president of ASPN right now. So you 3 gentlemen have the floor, and I want you to talk a little bit about how we can come together as different societies, but together as a whole, as one society.
Dr. Wan's on mute. So there he is.
So first of all, Tim, thank you for inviting me. This is such a different type of webinar, and just listening to Paul's and Karina's and Sunny's story, it just touched my heart. And what you are doing is really something very amazing. As a part of the society, I think this is so important that there should not be any animosity. I think we have, as a human being, some kind of way to say I'm better than you or bigger than you, but this is pandemic and this is for everybody. We are all in this, and the way you put this this webinar is just unbelievable. And I think as a society, if you cannot stand together in time of need, then you should not be in the society. I think one of the obligations that society has is, other than education and all these other things they do, is to stand together and provide the strength. So I personally cannot thank you enough, all you guys, Chris and Stan, and putting this webinar and inviting me on this very important webinar. I'm really personally honored to be part of this.
Eric,
yeah, and
Eric, your thoughts?
I'd like to just go ahead and second that. I'd like to thank Tim, Stan, and Krishnan for putting this platform together. And I think the thing that's been most impactful to me is just the universal nature of this pandemic. It doesn't matter if you're president of the American Society of Pain Neurosciences and run all of Kansas, like my good friend Dawood, or if you are president of the ASIP Society and in New York, like Sudhir, who's a good friend and mentor to me, or myself, president of PSPS out here on the West Coast in California. Everybody gets affected, and we all have an opportunity to work together on our basic desire of being healthcare providers, which is the great opportunity we have here. And I just want to thank, there's tons of people that you're not seeing on this webinar that are part of all of our societies, and that's the beauty of this opportunity, is all those people have effects and great positivity going forward. And my team's been amazing, and just kind of in honor of that spirit, just announcing to everybody here tonight, I'm going to be donating $1,000 personally to the fundraiser to such a great cause. So thank everybody for the opportunity.
Wow, that's very impactful, Eric. As you know, I love you, and you're always so that's a great gesture for your love of people in general. So thank you so much. Dawood, your thoughts?
Yeah, I know we're short on time here, so I'll be very brief. But I think this is, first of all, I'd really just want to, pray for the, safety of all our friends that were on the panel today that are on the front lines. my wife and I, we listen to the Paul Lynch summary videos every night. So something that he said a few nights ago really struck me when someone asked him. I think he said, a friend said, "What are you doing? You have all these kids." And he said, "I want to raise kids that run into the fire to save people, not kids that run away." That really that struck me too. So I think, not all of us will really have those unique opportunities to go on the front lines, but I think one thing we all can do, we're all pretty blessed financially to be able to give during this time. It's easy to give when you're doing well and the economy is going well, but really during those times people might not need that much. Really, these are the times when people really need we need to embrace that altruism. So I think I try to stay apolitical and all these things, but the CARES Act that came out also has put in some nice financial incentives for us to be able to give during this time. Some of the tax benefits are significantly better than they would be if you gave in other times. So I think we need to all take advantage of those kind of things. I thank everyone for kind of tuning in today, and ASPN kind of pledges to continue to kind of support this cause. I think this is not going to be something that's going to go away right away, and people are going to need help for a long time, not just from COVID itself, but all of the economic impact that this has really caused. So it's going to take a while for people to get back on their feet.
All three of you with lovely comments. Krishnan, you have a question for the panel, and then Stanley, and then we'll close.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think the fact that we have all three of you on the same panel is a testament to kind of the unity that this would cause. So what would you guys tell the members? So why I bring this up is Tim had posed a challenge to me, and I had said, Tim, we're going to make it up to $100,000 because this is truly a wonderful fundraising event that is beyond any society, beyond the number of pain physicians all over this country helping our colleagues. How do we get to the folks that really to tell them how important this is beyond the stories shared? How do we really get that all societies to embrace this message that this is really something important? What message would you tell your members in your respective societies?
I think people are looking for the opportunity. Maybe they don't know this is out there. Maybe we have to market on social media and reach out to more people. I think this is a good opportunity, and once they know, I think they will be very happy to donate. Yeah, because this is really I think reaching out to them is more important. And with that, actually, I also commit myself to pledge $2,000 at the end of this webinar.
Wow, you guys are very touching. Stan, you want to ask a last question?
My pledge would be to just find someone that it's really rich. So I'll ask Stan Golovac to plug in the difference to what it takes to get to $100,000. He could probably sell a couple of those fancy bottles of wine in his cellar, and we'd get there pretty quick.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much, Dawood. I appreciate that. I've always said we all need to learn how to play in the sandbox. So, this is a great opportunity for us to put our guards down, our barriers down, and maybe, Dawood, Sudhir, and Eric and societies could all unite together and be a lot stronger than being, fragmented. I think this will show unity. I think this will definitely show all of our members of who we really are and what we stand for. And I think marching forward, that would be the best way to go. But I'll let you, presidents, decide that. But, on behalf of everyone, thank you very much for your great participation in what we've done to raise as much funds as we've done so far.
So a couple closing thoughts. We're going to have another webinar on May 7th that's going to involve both cancer, pain, and I think emerging from COVID coming forward. And then Dawood, or actually Tristan, you want to talk about the other one here, the business strategies? You're muted, Christian.
Yep. Thanks, Tim. I think a lot of folks that are we're in different parts of the country where COVID's less present versus those like in New York, where I think social distancing is still going to be a protracted measure. I think there's a lot of questions on what's the best approach to come out of there, what strategies for both small, large academic practices do we recommend? And I think this is going to be a really important one, which is very timely because I think we're looking at working on some guidelines and recommendations also. So I think this is going to be very important for a lot of folks across the country that are starting to get back to work and figuring out what to do.
And then I'll remind you about our annual meeting is moved to September 17th through the 20th, Lowe's Hotel, South Beach. Last thought of the night, I want to thank all my good friends for coming on. We were going to have some more questions, but we really ran out of time. But I do think what we do know is that we're surrounded by good people. From Sarah Hartman to Dave Daggett to our three frontline heroes to Priyanka Pulled Out Fellowship to our society leaders. We're surrounded by good people who care about each other and care about you if you're on this podcast or this webinar tonight. We're going to rebroadcast this. Please tell your friends to come on board and donate some money to help with all these great causes. And most of all, stay safe and think of each other, be kind to each other. And at the end of the day, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this as better people than we were before this began. And I thank all of you for coming on tonight. God bless and stay safe. Good night.
God bless. Take care.
Good night.
Good night, guys.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.